Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight it is Wednesday, May 8th, 2019. It is a regular meeting of the Finance Committee. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and is televised. Thanks everyone for being here. It's good to see everyone after a last couple of tumultuous weeks, I guess, is the way to put it, right? It's a regular meeting tonight. We need to reorganize. So this is our first time, not first time, but first time. Jamie, you're here. Mike, you're here. We've got Emily and John. Patrick is missing, but hopefully he'll be here sometime soon. And we expect to reorganize tonight. That's one of our obligations after an election has taken place, that the Finance Committee reestablishes who we are, what our roles are, our committee appointments. Patrick, thanks for coming.
We saved you a seat.
Oh, good.
Right here, next to the teacher.
Hi. I just came from T-ball, sorry. I did real good.
Thanks so much. So regular meeting tonight. We're here to reorganize, reestablish committee appointments, subcommittee appointments. Also to identify a willing victim who is interested in being nominated for an appointment to the school planning subcommittee alongside our friend Patrick here. That's not an appointment that we on FinCom make, but it is a nomination that we submit to the town moderator, and the town moderator is the one who ultimately makes that appointment. I did circulate for everyone a few sets of minutes. I think we have 3 minutes to accept in tonight's meeting. We also have on the agenda our department head assignments too, and what we call cluster assignments. And I invite anyone, if you feel like taking a stab at explaining, especially for John and for Emily, what it is we do inside of our clusters.
I'll take a stab. So essentially we've taken all of the town departments and kind of grouped them off, in most cases just kind of by, people that are related. So like my cluster was the collector treasurer, the assessor, and another one related to those two that I can't think of at the moment. And basically just through the year, we just kind of keep in touch with the department heads. When we get closer to December, January, February, we meet with them, kind of go over what they think their budgets are gonna look like, how they're doing with their current budget so far into the year. And basically we just delegate that kind of more individual level of oversight down, since it's easier to split it up than to try to have all of us look at every department.
Very good. That one is not an appointment or an assignment. That's a volunteer action, and each of us takes a role in having a cluster. So that's divided among all 9 of us. And that's, if you can align with your interests, that's great. We have a couple vacancies, and we have a couple decisions to make whether or not we're going to stay with our subcommittee assignments, or if you want to give those up and forfeit them and throw them into the queue. So we'll be voting on those tonight. Without further ado, we can get into the first piece of this agenda, and that is to review and inventory any outstanding draft warrant articles for the town meeting on May 20th. At this time, all we have outstanding is the old debts that may need to be paid at the end of the fiscal year, and we have 3 warrant articles that could not be voted on last week, and that's related to bargaining and negotiations, and that still has not concluded. So at this time tonight, we have nothing to vote on. We do have a meeting scheduled on May 20th at 6 p.m. of the Finance Committee before FinCom, and if we have something to vote on, either in that debt that needs to be paid, those bills that need to be paid, or if we do have votes to take on the negotiations, those bargaining agreements, those 3 articles, we'll do that at that time. So right now, please mark your calendars for a tentative 6 p.m. meeting on May 20, Monday night, May 20. And that's at Oliver Ames High School. And for the life of me right now, I can't remember which room we've been assigned to, but I'll see if I can't get that before we close out tonight.
So Roberta, we will not be meeting next Wednesday. I know we left that just out there.
We've had enough of you. We've had enough.
I figured showing up today would suffice for like 6 months.
I think we're good.
You are again, just real quick. Let me do my usual response, but we are being taped. So.
And reminder to myself, we are being recorded and taped, right, and broadcast live, so keep yourself in check. No, we won't meet next Wednesday, Jamie. Thank you for asking.
Okay, so we get the day off.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Organization of Finance Committee post-annual election. Composition of the Finance Committee. First of all, what we're looking to do tonight is to determine, first of all, whether or not we will have co-chairs, who those co-chairs will be, or if we want to mix that up a little bit. There's no obligation for us to have a chair and a co-chair. We could revert to the composition of every other town committee where it's a chair and a vice chair, but that's, I'm not going to be the one that makes that motion to make a change. But that's up to the committee if you so decide. I do know that having been a co-chair last year, there were times where it was confusing, where, you know, who's doing what, and department heads not knowing who they needed to reach out to. Was it supposed to be Mark? Was it supposed to be Roberta? Who had the ball and who was on first, kind of thing. So not that it's impossible, it's just, you know, it's just a confusing setup. But
I'd like to make a motion to move back to vice and chair. I think it's to your point, I think it's a better solution. It makes it an easier sort of who's at fault. I mean, who's in charge. But it also, it aligns us with all the other committees. It makes it an easier process for everybody involved.
Second.
all those in favor? Any opposed? Thanks, Stacy. So with that, we have two positions now that we need to vote for. We need candidates who are interested in volunteering to be chair. We need someone who is willing to volunteer to be a vice chair. In that role, or in this new vice role position, I do encourage that whoever does put their hand in the air for that is somebody who is either going to be here next year, so a sophomore or a junior who's stepping up, or someone who knows that they are interested in moving forward with a re-election for 2020 to stay for another 3-year term. I say that only for purposes of continuity. It's been quite a learning experience for me stepping into this role, in what responsibilities I carry with me, and some of the just that legacy knowledge that I think is important for us to carry on. So I will start first with to seek anyone who's interested in volunteering for this seat.
Not a soul.
God,
I think this is
again,
gonna
I
be
think you've done a fantastic
No,
job.
I
If that
nominate
means
Roberta.
anything.
Can we volunteer other people?
Want to take away such a powerful voice from the chair role. I think we're all in agreement. I'd like to make a motion for Roberta to not be able to relieve the chair seat. Can I make that motion?
Second. No, you've done a fantastic job. Honestly, your leadership has been really pivotal.
Thank you, thank you. So again, I'm the one who forgot to step back when they said I'm looking for volunteers, right?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested, I'm happy to, if so approved by this body, to be your chair for 1 more year.
Motion to recognize Roberta as the chair of the Finance Committee.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstaining? Stacey, I'm abstaining on that one.
Gotta be careful with those abstentions.
Yeah. I have something in my throat. Okay, next, we are looking for someone who will volunteer to be a vice chair.
Are we allowed to nominate people as well for this?
Oh,
Okay,
absolutely.
all right. Just put everyone on the hot seat for a moment.
If I have my druthers, I nominate Patrick.
I'll volunteer.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstaining? There we have it.
Be the homer to vote for myself.
Hi, hi. Listen, we have a lot to do.
Vice president doesn't get it either, so.
All right, okay, well, thank you all very much for that. We're going to move right into subcommittee appointments. We have four positions, 4 subcommittee appointments that we're responsible for taking care of. 1 is for audit subcommittee, 2 for budget subcommittee, and 1 for capital planning committee. Right now, for the 2018-19 fiscal year, we had Davis was our capital planning committee appointee.
Mm-hmm.
On budget subcommittee, we have Jen Stacy with Mike DePietro on budget subcommittee. That was like a question, not that it was your name, Mike.
We've kind of known each other for a little while now.
She definitely forgot.
That we were good. And I am the representative on the audit subcommittee. So with that, is anyone interested in?
Should we explain, maybe for the newer members, we should explain time
Oh, terrific.
time dedication, things of that nature.
That's a great idea.
And maybe we can get an idea as to what actually is entailed from the existing.
That's a terrific idea. Audit is first with an A. The audit subcommittee, I will tell you, was very active over the past couple years when we were reviewing the operational audit, the town's operational audit, and going through line by line and looking at recommendations and opportunities for the town to find efficiencies or financial opportunity inside the operational audit that was conducted. Now that that has concluded and resolved, we have only the annual financial audit that takes place for the town. There's an external audit company that performs the audit. The audit committee does vote on and make a recommendation for who the auditors are, but it's ultimately the Board of Selectmen who make that appointment and make that decision. And we really meet probably now, I think, 3 to 4 times a year at most. And it's, you know, we'll hear from the auditors about the preliminary audit findings in the spring. And then we look at the scope of the audit in the fall. And I'm guessing on this only because without the operational audit, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what was the timing on everyone? But really, I think at the end of the day, we'll meet probably 3 to 4 times at maximum. So that's the audit subcommittee. You don't need to be an auditor. You don't need to be a financial wizard or expert. You really need to have an objective opinion and an objective mind about hearing what the results are. Okay. That's the audit committee. I'll turn over to budget subcommittee for Jen and Mike.
Do you want to start? You want me to start?
I'll jump in there. Budget subcommittee is a group that's made up of a couple of folks from Board of Selectmen, a couple of folks from Finance Committee, and Connor and
Schools.
yeah, thank you. And we meet. Actually, I jumped into it in the middle of
Probably about
a budget season,
yeah.
so it was a little bit busier. How often do we meet when
about
it's not?
6 times a year, but there's an uptick from like January to March as we're preparing for the joint select board / FinCom presentations that we have at the end of March around the budget departmental presentations. Back to you. Unless you want me to keep going.
Keep going. You're doing better than I am.
The group really dovetails very nicely with what we do here. It's kind of a deeper dive into the budget, the structure of how the budget works. For me, it's been a really good way to get my hands, you know, in down and dirty with like the more detailed line items. So we tackle some big questions around the budget because it's representation from the school and the select board, and you have a different perspective than we have here. We've been working a lot on long-range planning and thinking through kind of looking ahead for the community, and how we kind of trying to tackle, identify some of the big problems that are on the horizon and think through other ways of potentially, bringing solutions to town. So it dovetails very closely with what we do here. Again, we also did a presentation for the BOS FinCom presentations, kind of kicking it off, setting the tone, understanding what was going to be happening, looking ahead. Did I miss anything? We go into some of the metrics around debt and other metrics on a deeper level than we do in these meetings as well. So I think that kind of covers it. Anything else?
No,
Yeah, you'll just see
that's
some
pretty much it.
conversations that we can't get into because of the people who are in the room. That's kind of one of the big areas, and it comes back and reports to this group so we can work together.
Probably the best way to look at it is from a financial standpoint, it's the most cross-functional team
Yeah.
that looks at the town's finances.
Thanks for that. Back to audit committee, because you tricked my memory on composition of the audit subcommittee. Like the budget subcommittee, we have representation from the schools, FinCom, the Board of Selectmen. We have an at-large appointee. I don't know if you don't have any at-large on budget, do you?
Community member.
Yeah, community member.
So, because I think it's more
If
specialized.
we do, they've shown up.
We have a very targeted community member.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, and then we'll move, if you don't mind, we'll go to Davis. Let us know what you do on capital planning.
Sure. So the capital planning committee, basically we're responsible for considering any requests that exceed $25,000. So that can kind of be anything from, a request for new vehicles, which can sometimes be like around 30,000, or something that was on the budget this year, the new roof at RO, which is like $600,000. And so the composition is there are 4 members who are either elected or appointed, but they're not from any of the other boards. And then there's 1 representative from the planning board. There's 1 from the finance committee. And then Wendy, the town accountant, is also on the committee as well. And so basically what we do is, it's actually very similar to what the finance committee does. As the budget season goes on, the capital planning committee receives requests from the various department heads. So, we'll call in the police chief, the fire chief, the town assessor, people like that, whenever they have a capital request, and we'll consider their requests. And then in the lead up to budget season, we'll vote on which capital requests we're going to recommend be included in the budget. And that is basically what we looked at last week, that big, list of the things we're funding and all the other stuff in the backlog. As far as time commitment goes, outside of budget season, there's really no meetings. So kind of from June to September, or October, there's not a whole lot for us to do, unless there's like an emergency request that comes up. And then we'll usually meet about once or twice a month, / as needed. And then once we vote on the capital expenditures to be included in the town budget, then you're done until next year, basically. So for example, right now we don't have any more capital planning meetings until after town meeting, because we've already submitted the capital budget.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly add to budget has been meeting Mondays at 6. That could change though. I think they kind of determine what the game plan is, but it sounds like they've been sticking with that for a schedule prior to Mike and I joining, and it had been working. So that may be the expectation or maybe not, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, and audit usually meets Wednesday nights at 6 before this meeting. And Wendy also sits in on audit.
I have allergies, I'm sorry.
I just thought you were choked up.
Trees are killing me. Yes, that's what it is. Very honored to be the vice chair.
Do that too.
While we're in this descriptive mode, would you mind talking about the school planning committee? And
So, school planning committee, I actually don't know what the cadence is right now, because it feels like it comes it sort of depends. It's sort of in flux right now what the timing is, but it's generally once a month, if not twice a month. It's on Wednesdays, generally at 6 o'clock, at the school. And the makeup of that board is very similar to what you've heard. There's a little bit of representation from every other committee or board in town. So there is a member of the select board, principals, Dr. Cabral, a community representative, a school board representative, two school board representatives, and then 2 finance committee representatives. It's actually kind of a fascinating process in that it's all about this upcoming potential school plan for a new, all 3 elementary K through 2 schools being consolidated into a single school. There's an entire process that we have to go through, from approving the final design that we want to move forward with, and all of the different pieces of that design, all the different representations that we put together, that then all go to the MSBA, which is a governing board that decides exactly how much essentially of the overall cost of the school. There's a certain amount of that that's eligible costs that we can get roughly 55% of that cost back. So it's a huge opportunity for the town. The back of the napkin calculation right now is that it's approximately a $92 million project. If we did nothing, if we didn't pass this and we had to go through the process of actually fixing the 3 existing schools that we have, that alone is somewhere in the realm of $72 million, just to bring them up to code, not to address any sort of educational concerns or gaps or anything like that. So that committee itself is very much a lot of engagement, a lot of discussion, a lot of really, really interesting information about what's happening with the school project, and then eventually that will be an entire cadence of votes, final approvals, schematic design votes, all the way through to the actual presentation of that project to the town, and then a subsequent vote for a special town meeting to approve the cost of that project. That's it. It's cool.
Each of the subcommittees, not budget, each of the subcommittees, including the school planning committee, have an expectation when we meet, if there's been a meeting, to provide an update during our regular finance committee meetings. That's a standing agenda item.
This is my ongoing note-taking of all the
Okay, so with that, I'm going to, I'll start myself. I am interested in continuing to be on audit subcommittee, just to keep that continuity going. I'm okay with that, unless anybody else has an interest to participate or volunteer to be on audit subcommittee. Again, you all step back. Okay, so I'm going to need a motion to keep me on audit.
moved.
Second.
All those in favor? All those against, opposed? All those abstaining?
Do I have to get No, because I was nominated for school planning and then the town moderator.
Can you explain
appointed.
that portion a little bit? Because I am interested in the school planning. I don't understand the process of nominating a candidate to be appointed by town moderator.
Sure.
We voted. We had this happened twice. The first time it happened, Mark went, and essentially we voted as to whose name we were putting forward, put that name forward, and then the town moderator decided yes, no. I don't see any instance where the moderator would be like,
No, and
that Jamie guy.
in fact, the moderator looks to us for our recommendation because she wants it to be somebody who's interested and willing, capable, and interested.
And it is we have to have two members on the committee, so it's our appointment to that. So if interested, it's essentially us saying to the moderator, this is the person that's interested. If there were multiple people that went for it, I assume, then that would be something where she would have to make a choice.
Mhm.
But it's essentially, we're making the presentation of who should be that person. Unless she has a grudge against you.
Okay, for budget subcommittee, Jen, Mike, interest?
I'm interested in continuing.
I am as well.
Is anyone else interested?
Anyone else interested in volunteering for budget subcommittee?
To the new people, we keep the space open because we have a wrestling match to determine who actually gets the nomination.
We do bring in mud for that.
Do you really want to try me in that?
No, I'm afraid, to be honest.
Okay, so we'll make a motion to keep Jen Stacy on Budget Subcommittee. That's the first motion.
So moved.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? We'll make a motion to appoint and continue Mike DePietro for Budget Subcommittee.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstain?
Everybody's abstaining on their own vote. I feel like I should, but
It's
the
just,
cool
it's
kids are doing
very,
tonight.
yeah. Capital Planning, Davis, what do you think?
I would be interested in continuing. I would also be accepting of someone else wanting to do it.
Anyone else interested in volunteering for Capital Planning? I make a motion to
A lot of smart people.
keep Davis in.
Second.
And all those in favor? All those opposed? Any abstain? And there we have it. Okay, and now for a candidate for the School Planning Committee, which is an appointment by the town moderator. We are looking for a nomination for a FinCom member to join. Oh, wait, I don't know, should we do it
I
just in
don't know
case?
if I have to again, but we might as well do it
Let's
just in
do it
case.
just in case.
Jane didn't say that I had to go put my name back in because I was already, well, let's do it just in case.
Okay.
Hi, I'd like to be nominated to continue as the school.
I nominate Patrick.
There we go.
I second the nomination for Patrick. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Excellent. Patrick, welcome and congratulations. We're looking for,
Yeah, before we continue, so Timothy, you have a lot, you were
I'm
working.
good, yeah, I don't want that school planning committee.
I just was thinking, yeah, of your intimate knowledge, because you were on what was it last?
I'm still on cluster 9, which
His
is
department.
Southeast, yeah, we're Southeast Regional and the schools, so to
And the
take
school.
on the additional school planning would be
Two.
even more.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I kind of,
So the one
avoid the
person that I would
subcommittees
defer
as
to in a
much as
heartbeat
possible.
was just because of his intimate knowledge, and I understand too and respect that you've got it extremely time-consuming, I think, of all the clusters. It's a big one, but I wanted to first defer to Timothy, so.
I would be very happy making a motion,
I nominate Jamie.
yes.
wait, anyone else
Yeah, is
interested
anyone else
in?
interested before we?
All
The
right.
two new people are very bright. I don't know if we've mentioned that yet.
We didn't do that our first year.
No, we were all like, yes!
Yeah, me.
How many times does it meet? Every
Every-
day?
great.
Great.
Can we do more? Jamie, I would like to nominate you to be the FinCom nominee to the School Planning Committee.
Seconded.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed?
But what I will say is, I hate to shock you when it's the first time a moderator turns someone down, so I'm just throwing it out there. I hope this works out for you all. And I am interested.
Oh, we can churn through a lot more people if it doesn't work out for that. That's fine. Cut off.
Does that sum everything up now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, department and cluster assignments for 2019 to 20.
I do not. I might save to my drive. Let's see. Do you guys have any questions about the cluster thing? It's quirky.
It's quirky. Do you all have the clusters to refer to, or to print them out? Does anybody need me to email them now? I did send them around. It's in the attachment on the.
So, the question is twofold.
Mm-hmm.
We have the existing. Oh God, I can't breathe. We have the existing committees, or the existing clusters
Clusters,
that
yep.
are open. And so, what we did last time, which I'm open to suggestions if we continue this, is that if there's an open cluster and we have existing people that want to look around for those open clusters, we should discuss that to begin with. And then when Tim is done asking to get off of we'll give him DPW and it'll just be a net, net switch.
DPW is mine.
Sorry.
Okay.
You do
Water.
it.
Okay, so wait, if I heard you correctly, you want to look at the vacant spots introduce those first, right?
Yeah, let's introduce the vacants first, because then we can say, is anyone interested in switching and or raising their hand for those departments,
Okay.
for those clusters?
Got it, very
This one
good.
is vacant.
Mark Lamb was formerly responsible for cluster number 1, which is the budget related to Selectmen, FinCom, the Reserve Fund, Town Council, and the Town Clerk's Office. That's cluster 1, and it's vacant. The second cluster that has been freed up with Stephanie's departure from FinCom, Stephanie Keller.
Correct.
Inspectional Services, Board of Health, Council on Aging, Veterans Department, and Recreation. That's cluster 6. So, do we have anyone who is wildly interested in either of those,
Including switching from their existing.
including a switch or change from what you're currently assigned to?
I'm rather fond of the ones I have.
I'd be interested in, I think you said it was cluster 6, the one that's inspectional services, Board of Health. That one.
Okay, anyone else interested in that cluster? Now what Davis is going to be freeing up from that is accountant, collector treasurer, and the assessor's office. Don't all rush at once.
Well, is it just down to the two of us now? Like, is everybody else planning on?
Well, I guess we should ask, does anyone want to switch? I guess is the first question, really.
Except for Davis, yeah.
Except for Davis, who we know wants to switch.
Davis wants to switch.
Is there anyone else that wants to trade?
So I'm okay staying on schools, but I do understand that that is one of the largest departments. And if somebody is interested in it, I'm open to hear. For the new folks, I came on new and I got into the schools, and it was a huge transition. It was definitely trial by fire, to say the least. There's a lot to it. The only caveat I have with Cluster 9, and I think we spoke about it before, is the other accounts that's listed on the bottom.
Off-budget accounts, yeah?
Off-budget accounts. So if I remain on Cluster 9, I would have to transfer that responsibility into another cluster. We did that last year. We'd have to do that again this year if I'm going to remain on Cluster 9. So I'm more than happy to stay on the schools. I will say it is a very, if you like watching 3 to 4 hour meetings on ECAT or attending school committee meetings and those kinds of things, it's a big one. That being said, it's also probably one of the most intimate with the town as well. Yeah. So I don't want to sound doom and gloom with it. It's probably one of the most rewarding budgets, but also one of the most difficult at the same time.
I'm not sure if that's heroic or a cry for help.
A little bit of both. I mean, it really is.
I think you framed
peaks and valleys.
it well.
Yeah, it's peaks and valleys. I mean, I won't. The past few months have been evident of that.
Was the off-budget accounts moved off of you because of your role with the town? Because of your
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Who took that over last time?
I believe it rolled into
Did you
cluster
inherit that?
1.
Oh,
I didn't do that, that would have been Mark.
Yeah, I think it went into cluster 1.
What is included in the off-budget ones?
So the off-budget includes,
Graft.
yeah, basically it's some things like, some things are very simple, such as there's an account for the upcoming celebration for the town's anniversary, parades, those kinds of things. But there's also, and the reason that I try to abstain from there is funding set aside for union negotiations.
I see. Okay.
As an employee of the town,
Yep.
and as a union member, it's not, I just don't feel comfortable auditing the accounts
Sure.
that are part of the union negotiations. So, but like I said, it's not a huge part of cluster 9. It's actually a very small part of it, and I think it did roll into cluster 1 last time. So,
Having said that, Tim, are you interested in keeping it, or?
it's kind of one of those things. I've already taken the dive into the school budget. It is kind of a learning curve to get into it. If somebody is interested in taking it over, I'm more than happy to pass on what I've learned over the past year. I'm also just 1 year into it, and I can tell you this isn't. I'm learning every time I meet with the department heads, I'm learning every time I dive into the budget, because it changes constantly. Just the equations and the math that goes into it is heavy. And the politics from the federal to state level changes daily also. So,
I think personally, continuity would be good, especially going into this next year where we've got the MSBA component, the school planning
so I'm more than happy to stay on it. That being said, I just have to move that one portion.
Okay. Anyone else interested in nope. No contest for Tim. Okay. Cluster 8, oh, I know what Patrick wants. Cluster 8, library and planning.
I'm not moving. I will be more than happy to take the off-budget accounts into cluster 8 if that's easier, because I only have the 2. I'm the only one with 2.
Oh, that would be great.
So just feel free to shift that over to mine.
Okay.
I'd like to stay with cluster 3.
Hang on, I'm going up from the bottom. Okay.
I thought you were going left to right.
Well, I was, and then Tim came down, and no, it's just, I gotta keep it straight. Okay,
Get there.
cluster 7, debt and interest, employee benefits, and other general government is me, and I'd like to keep that. So that's cluster 7. Anybody else interested in that? Debt and interest, employee benefits, other general government.
That other one's a barn burner.
Yep, okay, so cluster 6, Davis just volunteered for, that's Inspectional Services, Board of Health, Council on Aging, Veterans Department, and Recreation, okay? Cluster 5 is Water Enterprise, Solid Waste and Recycling, Data Processing.
Is that Mike?
Is
Yep.
that Mike?
Yeah, you bet.
It's a pretty sweet one.
Yeah, that's,
You literally call them and you're like,
I know.
"Hi."
Hey,
They're like,
it's
"We're
Mike."
funded. We're funded.
yeah.
We bill people. We're funded." And you're like, "Good talk. We'll see you later."
A nice conversation with Mike Delton. I'll keep it if no one wants to fight me for it.
That sounds like the one to fight for, Emily
that's
and John,
probably-
just in case you are
Full
wondering.
disclosure, it is.
That's totally the one to fight for.
Is this like the Yankee swap where no one like challenges anybody?
All too nice.
All right, so Mike's staying with water, solid waste and recycling, and data processing. Next up, cluster 4 as I go up, DPW admin, DPW building and grounds, DPW highway, and DPW snow and ice.
I would like to keep it unless someone wants to make it.
No one does snow and ice like you do.
I know.
No one does it
Winter
like
green
the
right
ice
here.
cream.
So nice budgets where you jinx us every single time.
We did not
Yeah,
overspend
for that
this
I'm going to
year.
oppose.
We were underspent this year.
That's true.
All on your watch.
Off to a great start.
Great job
Yeah.
overall with
Yeah.
the weather this year.
All right, next up, cluster 3, police, dispatch, fire, and ambulance. And I heard you say, Jamie, you wanted to keep that?
Yes.
Another one, any interest in fighting for that cluster, police, dispatch, fire, ambulance? Jamie, looks like you got it. Now this one is vacant. This one's up for grabs, everyone. Accountant, collector, treasurer, and the assessors.
So the 2 vacant are 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So it's clearly
Yeah, it's clear
down
to
to us.
us, yeah.
I don't have a strong preference either way. I will say that the nature of the Army has me all over the continental United States for next year. So I don't know if there's one that works better with between the 2 vacant.
They're both pretty.
They're both pretty phone callish.
Yeah, so having.
First one would probably be the simplest.
Yeah,
'cause we
so-
have all of $9 in our
Right.
normal budget. And
So,
then like a small
having done the second cluster last year, all of these in both of them, they're very similar in that overwhelmingly most of their budget is just salaries, and then each of them has maybe like $2,000 tops in like discretionary spending. So
can't really go wrong.
yeah, it's each one is, you know, you meet with the person, you say, you know, how does it look? True.
It has the last 10 years, you go good talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
God.
So they're both very low commitment just because of the nature of each of their budgets.
Do you have a preference between either of them?
I don't actually. I can take number 2. I can take Davis's old position.
Cool.
So you got it. And Emily, we will put you therefore up with cluster 1 with selectmen, FinCom, reserve fund, town council, and town clerk. Excellent. Good work, everyone.
Do we have to?
I think we should just make a motion to accept these department budget assignments for fiscal year 2019-20.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? And the motion carries. Excellent.
Neat.
Okay, that brings us up to minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes. Last week, since the meeting did go quite long, I elected to move all those minutes for acceptance to tonight's meeting. We have a 3:13 FinCom, we have a 3:27 joint BOS FinCom meeting, and we have a 4:10 FinCom meeting.
Did you attached all three? Yeah, you did.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we can start with 3:13. That was a meeting Jen, Stacy, and Patrick, neither of you were here for. But Stephanie Danielson was here for that meeting, and she did introduce us to the Five Corners District Improvement Financing Plan in a pretty lengthy presentation. We did have budget subcommittee from Mike, audit subcommittee and school had none. Anyway, anyone willing to make a motion to accept the minutes as presented? Or any requests for change?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor? Any abstain? Any opposed? I should have done that differently, but thank you very much. The minutes for
27th.
March 13, 2019 are accepted.
Cool.
Next, we'll go to March 27. This was the joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. We met at Frothingham Hall Community Center. Our entire committee was present for that meeting. Did everyone have an opportunity to review? These minutes will also be presented to the Board of Selectmen with any changes that we have, or if we accept them as is, and they will vote to also accept these minutes on Monday night. So this is a twofer.
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? And the minutes from the joint meeting on March 27th are accepted. Next and last set for tonight is the April 10th meeting of the Finance Committee. Tim Vamosi and Jamie, neither of you were here that night. Joint meeting budget discussion. We talked, right, this was after the joint meeting had taken place. It was a conversation, and we did review just a few of the articles at that time.
Yeah.
Was this right before the election?
That's
This
correct.
is the last.
Yeah.
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? And the minutes are accepted. Excellent, we're up to date. We did have a meeting on May 1st, and I've included those minutes on the agenda. Those aren't ready for presentation for tonight, though. We'll defer that, and we will look at those the next time we meet. Committee member comments. I open to anyone interested with the report. Anything to discuss?
I have a quick committee update from school planning, which was, we have moved into, we actually said this last time, but it might have got lost in the shuffle. We have moved into the next phase of the planning. We have an accepted design that we are going back to the MSBA with, which is the single school location that incorporates all 3 school populations into one building. That is, the current outstanding pieces that are still happening right now are a traffic study is still being finalized. That traffic study will help to address the existing road concerns, the existing traffic concerns of the entire OA campus, with the new addition of these obviously 700 additional students that will be going to that one location. And then next steps are, there's still submissions going back and forth with the MSBA. We're getting closer and closer to our next design submission, which I believe takes place next week. And then at that point, we're once again back into an MSBA process of back and forth with final pieces, final configurations. We have put up also our cost overrun estimation, which is essentially we are putting in with this submission that we will not go above a certain number at any point. We are estimating that's going to be in the 110 million range, so that if anything changes, and as we discover more about the grounds or anything like that, if there's any sort of remediation that has to happen, that's still budgeted for. It's still in that cost overrun aspect, but the overall final schematic presentation of what the actual building will look like, what the design is, etc., that's still obviously farther out. When that happens, that'll actually finalize the final budget numbers. And Jamie, happy to share the notes that I have. I've been taking rough notes since the beginning. We're in a good stage right now that there's not a huge amount of competing interests, like multiple design stages, multiple pieces to go over. We're in a pretty straightforward aspect of it, and there's a lot of information. So I'll share whatever I've got with you.
When's the
If
next
the moder-
meeting that the public is, been to a couple of them?
Have you been to the big sessions, the big meet and greet sessions? Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that,
I feel like it's next
Eastman,
week.
when they were hosting,
Yes.
one in November, and then again at one that had the best turnout to date was probably the February or March.
I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'll let you know. With the pending appointment piece, even if you're not approved by them, which you should be, I'll send you the dates, and you can at least obviously attend, because it's still open to the public, so you can definitely go. But I'll share all the notes I have are
And the dates
Stuff
should be
like that.
online too, right, under the
I
school
think we've
planning.
scheduled it already. For some reason, my calendar's not opening. And actually, that goes for everybody. If anyone else is interested in attending, the more public exposure we get to it, the better off. My wife actually is a member of the Moms Club in town, and she actually just hosted a meet and greet over at the Queeset House tonight for some other moms in town to help get the information out there, help them know what's happening, things like that. We are happily looking for additional people to do that. If anyone wants to reach out to their friend networks and at least get people informed, it doesn't have to be a yay, nay, pro school, anti school. Just making sure that everyone knows what's coming down the pipeline for this vote, because it's going to be in front of the town sooner than later.
Can you remind me, Patrick, is the plan to have this voted on in the fall or next spring?
Fall, theoretically, good point. We were just talking about that. Theoretically, it would be a fall vote.
Mm.
The way that it works is that upon final submission, you, I believe, have 90 days to get town approval.
Okay.
So it could be that we get final submission in the November timeframe, and then it ends up being a early next year vote.
Sure.
It's going to be completely dependent on final schedules and then what the actual decisions are as to when that vote goes on.
Mm.
I think it's probably looking more like special town meeting later on in the year, and then whatever subsequent follow-ups need to happen in the following year.
Thank you.
That's it for me. I'll just
Are we
sniffle
redoing?
quietly. Sorry?
What were we doing? Okay. Committee member comments. Anyone else?
Yeah, I did, I got to go to, actually, I was fortunate enough to attend and actually retire the flag at Fire Station 2 on Depot Street. I don't know if you guys are up to date on what's going on there, but she was closed down, duly retired after many years of service. She's getting a facelift coming up, so we had a good representation from the Board of Selectmen, and we had a lot of the state reps, senators there. So it was good to see everybody there, townspeople. But I just wanted to say thank you to everybody in the town for getting the ball rolling on that, and Doug King for coming through on that as well. But of course to my brothers and sisters on the fire department there for everything they do and for their service there. But there's a much needed rehab going on there. But that station's very vital to the safety of that community down there, and it's good that it's going to be there for a long time to come. So just so the public knows, it is closed. They're going to see a closed sign out there. If you do have an emergency, just call 911, and the nearest station will respond.
Thanks, Tim. Anyone? I know in audit subcommittee, we were trying to schedule a meeting, but with crazy schedules for the month of May, we've deferred, so we won't meet until June.
There was a budget subcommittee being scheduled for tomorrow, but that has been canceled as well because we've approved budgets. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Anyone else? That brings us to community participation, and we have audience members tonight. If anyone would like to come up and speak, we'd be happy to have you.
Do I have to go up?
You do. Please come on up to the microphone and introduce yourself by name.
Done my hair.
By name and address.
Look how Mike's dressed.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Gold, address 76 Turnpike Street. I want to first and foremost thank you all for all of your service and all the efforts that you put into helping our town. And I'm looking more as folks are asking me with all of the anxiety wrapped around the budget, what can I do to help educate folks on what the next step should be between now and the town meeting? I know we keep telling everybody get informed, get involved, but what specifically would you recommend if someone's asking me what to do, other than sending you guys emails and berating your email boxes, which I'm sure you love? What else can I advise my fellow parents, especially the music parents, on what they can do over the next week and a half in order to prepare for the town meeting?
What a great question, and thank you for asking. I'll start by saying, first of all, the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, have recommended unanimously that we adopt the budget. With that, a vote to approve that warrant article for the budget needs to pass. It needs to pass at town meeting. If it doesn't, we're in a position where we basically stop things, don't we? And we've got to get to a place where we approve and adopt a budget. We believe, and I speak for the group, but please feel free to put your own comments forward with me or in opposition to me if you'd like. But we believe strongly, after consideration for the budget as it was presented, even with some of those very painful cuts that had to be incorporated, and still remain to be seen what's going to happen, right? Because what we know is that the school committee now has a dollar amount, that inside that dollar amount, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but they've got this pool of money. If passed, still things can shift. And I think we heard that from Dr. Cabral as she did her presentations over the last several weeks, and also as Connor presented to us last week, that those dollars still might get played around on the chessboard a little bit. And I don't think that's written in stone, and there's no commitment that that has to be the way it gets done. The school committee did approve it.
Connor Reed, the town administrator. So just.
Oh, sorry about that, yeah. And the school committee unanimously adopted the budget, right? And I don't know what that commitment to those line item budgets is, but that's not under the purview of FinCom to direct or to delegate, so.
Yeah, I mean, well, to answer your question, quite frankly, I think you're doing it. You're giving us information, you're letting us know that you're out there, that you're involved, that you're concerned, and that information is powerful. It's not going unnoticed. When you say that, we can just send emails, those emails are read, and when we get them in bulk, it makes us pay attention to those certain areas. The school budget is big, it's difficult, and it's constantly changing. I think Dr. Cabral and the school committee have kind of put together their plan, and I know there was some concern of moving money from here to there to meet the demands for the music program. However, I think Dr. Cabral said it many times that there are other priorities that would have to go in front of moving those line items to the line item for the music department. So what is that? What can we do? I think that we're kind of set, but continue what you're doing. I know I'm gonna continue to meet with the department heads and try to figure out ways we can get these programs reestablished, or look for different ways to meet the priorities, and subsequently, not saying that the music department isn't a priority, please don't get me wrong, it's just, they've made their priority list based on needs that affect things like state funding, and those types of things. So some of the costs that we have to fund through this budget will also be double negatives if we don't fund them, whereas the school department doesn't, the music department doesn't quite have that involved in it. So it's not that what you're doing isn't working, it's just, I think this year is kind of set, but if we continue that involvement that you have now into the next budget cycles, that we can continue to search and try to get these things put back together.
And to just add to that a little bit, something that definitely informed my decision making at the meeting last week is that I went, onto ECAT's records of, previous meetings, and I watched the school committee meeting where the school board and Dr. Cabral went through their budget. I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting that was right before ours, where there was a lot of people coming out and showing their support, sharing their views. I would definitely say that you don't have to watch the whole, however many hours long school board meeting, but in the first, I would say like half of it or so, Dr. Cabral presents her budget, and she gets interrogated pretty well, I would say, by the people who are there. There's a lot of questions and answers that go back and forth. And so not to assume that, anyone hasn't already done that, but if you haven't, I would recommend starting there and looking at, kind of the how that decision-making happened. And then just to kind of go off of what Tim was saying, with town meeting so close, I think it's unfortunate that, this came up so quickly, and that was just kind of a result of the way the budget process works, where where all the departments submit their initial numbers, and from there the town goes to them and says, yours needs to be less. So I'm expecting a new budget from you, and then after the next round, it needs to be even less. And in, Dr. Cabral's case, unfortunately, it needs to be even less. And just the way that system worked, it meant that we didn't learn until, within a month and a half of town meeting about the kinds of cuts that were being proposed. And, not to comment one way or another on those because my vote is obviously on the record, but just to go off of what Tim was saying, the next budget cycle essentially starts in, June, July, August, as people start spending money. I definitely think that getting involved is always, a good option. And really, being in touch with the school board, being in touch with Dr. Cabral, being in touch with the Board of Selectmen. I think that having a more kind of participatory process starting earlier on, I think that will probably help the decision makers, have a very clear idea of what exactly folks in the town are prioritizing, and it will give them enough time to work those into the kinds of budgets that they're building for the year. So just basically to echo what Tim said, continuing participation after this budget cycle, I do think is important because obviously our problems don't end after this year.
No, I think it's a moving target every time. And the problem is when you have that moving target, you keep losing bullets to hit it with. So it's going to be, I think it was made pretty clear that we're going to be having just as many difficulties next year. So I think it's up to the public to continue what you guys are doing, and letting the people that make the decisions know what your priorities are, and then letting us know, listening to when we explain to what the budget priorities are as well. And that back and forth conversation that's been happening here this time around will hopefully continue into that next cycle.
And if I heard correctly too, you wanted to know what can we do right between now and town meeting?
Yeah, so, and I appreciate all your feedback. I'm wondering, is our next step to really be meeting with the school committee at this point to see what the direction they can take in order to take the pile of money that they have and see what we can do to help
In
think
essence,
outside the box and how that pie works.
Mm-hmm.
in essence, yes. When at town meeting, essentially when we're voting on the budget, we are voting on the specifics of the budget, of which school committee is its own line item. Whereas we get pretty detailed with, my apologies, I inhaled some pollen before coming here, and
Okay, I heard Patrick
Says
brought
it
up-
was wrong.
I've been hacking at everybody for the last 2 hours. But what you're essentially voting on, where the budget is concerned, is the money that will go to schools overall, as a part of the overall budget. And I think one of the thoughts that goes through everybody's mind is what would happen if we didn't pass that? Tom would,
That is going to be one of my questions.
we wouldn't be able to spend any money.
Everything stops, essentially.
Basically have to shut down the town. As to how the school money gets spent, that's determined by the school committee and Dr. Cabral.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that we point out, it's clear. We know that the town several years ago did not pass an override. We're limited to increase the budget by 2.5%.
By law.
Maximum. Maximum. That dollar amount, that's a fixed amount, that's the most that we can increase the budget from last year. The town departments that you're hearing other representation from, not school, limited their increase to 2.1.
I think it's very good.
2.18%, which is below 2.5%, to afford those additional dollars to be, from the general fund, to be put towards the school budget. So I believe strongly that the town collectively has done the very best it could to get to this balanced budget, this level-funded budget. And we recommend it.
I would encourage you and folks that have similar concerns to look at the budget overall. And that is not a statement to diminish the music program. In fact, you may have seen I picked up my phone to deal with the text from my daughter who was at the show choir rehearsal over at the middle school. You won't find somebody who's a bigger supporter of the arts in town. But the reason that I say that we should be looking at the budget in its entirety is because, as Tim said, as Connor has said, as Dr. Cabral has said, this is a problem that's getting worse. Because we are statutorily required to limit our increase in the budget each year, and there are certain parts of the budget which increase faster than that 2.5%, and state aid does not grow at 2.5%. It doesn't take a lot of complicated math to know that we will be cutting more next year. And so what we need to do as a community is decide how we are going to deal with that. And so when it's by no means any sort of defeatist attitude, because as you said, the school committee will continue to, things will almost certainly shift as things come into focus. We saw that this year with the SRO. But the fact of the matter is that we as a community need to be looking at all of our priorities and how do we ensure that we have the incomes that we can spend them on everything. There's a crisis of mental health in our school system right now, which is largely under-addressed because we don't have the ability to bring in the people we need to do that.
And I think you'd find a lot of music parents that would argue that the music program helps.
And you'll find me you'll find me agreeing with them.
Okay, so I just want to make sure
that's
probably not the argument we want to go in with.
No. But what I mean is we can, what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to encourage you not to look at it as an either or. It's not. It's a question, and I use it as one example because that's one that Dr. Cabral has mentioned very frequently. Yes. Excuse me again. My point is just that there are very many, maybe not countless, but close to it, areas of everyone's budgets that are not being funded, and it's where the finance committee is concerned, we're looking at it from the perspective of the town overall. What advice and consent can we provide to the citizens of the town when we come out to vote at town meeting, because that's where the real decisions are made, to inform that process overall.
And if I can just add real quick, sorry, I don't mean to just have all of us talk you to death.
I mean, unless the kids wanted to talk, I'm the only one here. So.
Oh, sure, okay. I think the way that I've kind of been looking at it is, for the school to fund certain priorities that aren't being funded right now, there's kind of a couple different ways that could happen. One way would obviously be, an override that increases our overall, revenue collection and then our expenditure. And obviously that's something that, it would be a process, it has happened before. It didn't work last time, but that's not to say that it would never work. Outside of an override, if we're just dealing with the way that, the money kind of gets allocated, it's really a question of, like you mentioned, is it about going to the school board? If the school's budget is set, then it becomes the responsibility, of the school board and of Dr. Cabral to determine how that is spent. And so they would obviously be responsible for, setting those priorities. The alternative would be...
That's my next question. So let's say we
Sure.
override, and I'm new to this whole process,
Mm-hmm.
so pardon my ignorance.
Oh, sure.
If we got an override approved, that does not mean that Dr. Cabral would have to
Correct.
Correct.
put the music
Yeah.
department in place as parents are fighting.
Yeah, well, so an illustrative
Even though
example...
it is the music parents
Sure.
fighting for this.
Right, and similarly,
Potential-
we had heard last week a citizen who had asked about a transfer and using reserve funds
Yes.
to fund the positions. Similarly, even if reserve funds were moved into the school budget account, it does not mean that Dr. Cabral has to spend that money or the school board has to spend that money.
An example of that happened recently, actually.
So it's really the school committee that we need to be focusing a lot
Yeah.
of our into for the next week and a half, I guess is.
And then globally, right? Globally across the town, as we elicit support for the MSBA project, for the school project, and then next spring, perhaps looking at a potential for an override. And that takes consensus. That takes a lot of work to get a warrant article onto the actual warrant for voting for recommendation and for ultimately for town vote.
And I would say to that point, selfishly, because I'm on the committee, but the current status of the budget and the difficulties we're having with the budget and the cuts, et cetera, obviously not ideal. The question is that other things could happen in the meantime with these three aging schools that we're obviously looking at as a potential problem. We're in this incredibly rare position. It took us, I think, 11 years to get here. It takes on average 7 to 9 years to get into this MSBA program position. It's something that I think the passion that you guys are showing and the engagement and the fact that you're showing up to quite possibly the most boring meeting in town. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Victoria's all like, yeah,
The passion that you guys
I showed her
have.
the agenda.
Meeting minutes. Oh boy.
3 of them.
The passion that you guys have and sort of the engagement that you're putting out there and the emails that you're sending and all of that, I understand you're doing it with a very specific purpose, right? There's a goal in mind. There's a key sort of stake in the game that you want to show an effect for. I think everyone's mentioned that, like, at the end of the day, when we approve that budget, it is the entire budget, and then allocation happens. My point to you, though, is that if you can keep that passion alive and push for this type of school adoption, this is similar to that override process. But if this project goes through and we approve this at town meeting and we can tap into the passion of, to be fair, kids who are not going to benefit from it directly, but if a boiler blows up at Moreau Hall, that's a cost. If a roof fails at another school, that's a cost, and that money's coming from somewhere. This is a unique project that in no way, shape, or form plainly addresses the needs of the music parents, but it also helps deflect some of the other potential catastrophic costs that could come around to potentially be another issue that would come up against it.
It's cost avoidance, and that's
Correct.
a much bigger
So I would say,
element moving forward.
for your purposes, school committee, school board, Dr. Cabral, you're doing all the right things. And it's incredibly inspiring to see this level of activity. You've increased our meeting attendance outside of us like 600%. So
It's good to practice public speaking.
So, and I think that will obviously be portrayed through to the town meeting as well. I'm sure there'll be a lot of comments and a lot of discussion at town meeting, which is ideal. It's obviously it's the moment, it's the purpose for town meeting to have that type of conversation. I think that keeping that level of discussion and engagement up with the school board, up with Dr. Brawl, could have benefits, could actually pay out dividends on what the actual allocation of that funds are once they're in their hands. But then the other side of the coin is we have this really unique opportunity to get a new school system in town, which does pay benefits out to the rest of the school system, because it's one less line item they have to worry about for this. It's not going to necessarily decrease the entire school budget and suddenly we're like, check it out, we're on Easy Street. It's a completely separate sort of allocation of funds. But if it takes away the difficulty of the younger children from being in a school system, a school building that has some challenges, it's a refocusing of that funding to a more, I don't know if it's holistic is the word, but it's a more sort of evenly balanced look at everybody's on an even playing field, everyone's in a newer school building. Now what can we allocate funds for that we're not doing for remediation on old buildings, right? What does that open up for us?
Mhm.
That's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
You just don't want to come.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And if you're under 18, just give us your first name. Oh, you are excellent.
I am.
She's 18. Give us your full name and your address.
My name is Victoria Gold. I live at 76 Turnpike Street. I'm a senior at Oliver Ames High School. And music program aside, I just wanted to point out the fact that I know Connor Reed's presentation pointed out that the town of Easton in general is having a huge increase in needs of funds and needs of money. And I understand that these are big issues and they obviously require the attention of the overall budget. But I also would like to point out that if our school systems aren't funded well for whatever department, you know, in the schools, those problems when we graduate and when we become the adults in this town are really just going to get worse. And I know everyone's been mentioning that in the next few years it's just going to get worse and there's nothing we can do about that. But if we are helping these kids in these schools as much as we can, that is something we can do about it. And I know it might stink a little bit now. It's really going to help, and I just want to know the reason for that.
Why it's going to get worse in the next several years?
Why we're not putting more money towards the school.
Start by thanking you first, because for being engaged at 18 years old and what's going on in town is phenomenal. So thank you, and really congratulations for taking the time, and speaking to us. So this does go back, and I agree. And how about for the foresight of thinking about the long term, although it doesn't affect you because you're graduating this year, how important it is that we're looking behind and we're reaching back. And that's where I think we're all very passionate about the school system and the need for this town to have a strong and vibrant school system. And Patrick, I just want to make sure as you're talking about the new school project that people understand, so this cost avoidance, and this is all about making sure we make the entire school system better, is if the one boiler goes out at center school, we're in really big trouble because we're down to one, right, from 3. But we can't just go in and replace it because of the asbestos issue. So then that school gets shut down. And if you can imagine the millions of dollars that all of a sudden we need to go find, that we just, as you know now, we can't, because we have a 2.5% increase each year, that we can't just go find, so then things get cut. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I know you heard, and most people do tune into the all doom and gloom, but that's not true. We really are working towards these initiatives to make sure that we don't keep running up against these structural deficits moving forward. And that does take a lot of work, and it takes a ton of community support. And I think that's why everyone here is so excited to see the community support for this issue, which is one piece of the bigger puzzle. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I will say this, with the budget difficulties that we have, and with the sort of the ongoing financial difficulties that we're going to have, the school systems are still doing a really good job. And I think you're a credit to that, because you got up here to talk about the fact that you're very engaged, you're very informed, you know what's happening, and you care.
And she's leaving.
And she's leaving. You are the representation of that school process that has been, to be fair, underfunded for years. And I'm not saying it in a way that's, well, you turned out fine, so we'll be fine. But we have done very well with what we have. Whether or not we can continue that process, that's the real question mark, and that's the real difficulty we're all facing here. And that's why I think that the engaged sort of discussions you guys are bringing up is shining a light on something that, I'll be honest, my kids are very young. My kids are not in the school systems yet. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that the music program was in this position until this budget happened, right? I was in the music program my entire school life. Like, I'm going to force my kids to be in the music program no matter what they say.
Excellent.
One will do it. The other one will be like annoyed, but it's fine. But that entire conversation is the fact that you're here to raise the issue, to have that conversation and to keep shining a light on it. That's actually how things are going to change and get done. It's not a squeaky wheel gets the grease moment. It's a bringing awareness to something that the general town didn't know about. Like, I can't even tell you how many people have no idea this MSBA project's going on, which is terrifying. People, hello, please. That type of conversation and that type of email communication, that type of showing up at meetings and bringing this to the attention, that's what you have to do. That's the way to make that, to affect change.
So is there any way that more funding for the schools would be considered, or is this?
So, right, there's so much going on in town to increase revenues for exactly this reason. An override would be one thing that allows us to raise property taxes more than 2.5%.
That would raise money across the entire.
That's across the entire budget, right? That's one thing that would be our last resort, and the last thing that we want to consider. In the meantime, there are a lot of projects going on to increase revenues. Like, I don't know if you're paying attention to the district improvement financing plan, right? We're going to have a big new sewer project across the town of Easton. Have you seen the traffic, right? Have you started to see, right? Okay, so you know, that's going to allow businesses to come to Easton. And the more businesses that come, the more restaurants that want to come to town, the more commercial businesses that come to town, the more development that can happen, the more revenues the town benefits from. So the budget gets to go up, right? And again, that override thing is the last thing. The 2.5, that's fixed amount. We don't get to do anything more than that. That's the limit, unless we create new revenue opportunities in town. And that's the part that you hear Connor talk about when he talks about the DIF financing plan, and other projects that we can talk about, right?
Solar projects Direct
solar
increase to that.
projects, getting, you know, taxes and fees from a solar project that we've allowed to come to town. Things like that. It's really getting creative. Are we looking at fees too? Yeah, we're looking at fees. You know, should we be increasing fees that people are paying for their dog licenses or for, you know, all kinds of things, ways that we can squeak some extra dollars into the existing limited budget. I hope that helps to
Yeah,
answer
it
your
does.
question a little bit.
And also don't forget, you're 18 now, so you're a voter. And one of the best things you can do is head up onto the State House too and knock on their door. I know you said sending emails and those kinds of things, but that's exactly what I do all the time, trying to get more funding in too. So anytime you have an interest in a particular area, whether it's school funding or town revenue or those kinds of things, I know there's 80 other communities around us right now that are having the same discussion at their finance committee meeting. Excuse me, and their school departments are going through the same fight. So rallying up, put the rally cry out to those communities as subsequent voters and get that funding from the state and federal funding sources as well. So there's lots of other areas that you can hit it up at. And again, I thank you for it. You know, you hit a personal note with me there. By the time I was 18, I went to 13 different school systems. And I wanted to find a place for my family where we stayed in one. And not only just stay in that one, but see if they bring their kids back here too. And I think that's the goal of everybody here, to make the town better and to bring back our kids. So thanks for that point. But stay active, stay involved in it, and like I said, it doesn't just happen at the town level, it happens at the state level and the federal level. And while that seems like a big lofty golden dome up in Boston somewhere, I can tell you personally, if you go knock on the door, they're gonna listen to you, just like we did here tonight.
For people in town, the people at the State House, or people in their towns. The people up here were just the other day put into these chairs because people went out and they filled in a little circle that said, I want these people representing me. So vote. Get your friends to vote, the ones who are 18. Become familiar with why is it that our budget is challenged like it is? What are the different sources of revenue? How do we get to where we are and be active in the community? And I'm going to be sort of very blunt with you that it's not a satisfying answer, right? That the satisfying answer is, oh, did you think just call this person and the money will be there and it's better? We want to believe that somebody's choosing, yeah, heck with the music program. That's not what's going on. It's a complicated, we've only got so much money and we've got to make decisions about where it goes. And by we, I mean Dr. Cabral, Connor Reed, the people who are tasked with doing that. But what gets us to the point where it's not a heroic save the music program, but we have built a community that invests correctly for the long term, happens because somebody in your position gets her friends out to vote and says, these are the things that we want for our community and we're going to participate.
Yeah, and just, Mike, to add on to that too, and to dispel any misconception, the music program is not in jeopardy.
Thank you for mentioning that too, but yeah.
Well, I understand that we're
You know
not
what I mean?
cutting the entire
There
music
is a
program, but when you
complete
cut the roots of the music program, it's going to deteriorate the entire one.
Victoria, I appreciate you for saying that. And there are pieces to this that, yes, are being carved. I understand that, right? There are pieces of this that are being carved, proposed to be carved. But in totality, the school committee, the finance committee, the board of selectmen, the town administrator, Dr. Cabral, your teachers are wildly supportive and proud of the music program that Easton has. Oliver Ames has, and Easton Public Schools. So I do thank you, and I thank you for coming tonight. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to come up here and do what you've done tonight. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Have you considered running for office?
He's not joking.
I'm only 24. I'm not that much older than you. So seriously, like, it's not a pipe dream.
I'm only 24 too.
Yeah.
Me too.
I'm pretty sure Davis is 12.
I graduated from Oliver Ames in 2013, so, you know, I remember having...
Well, I'll go to school the next year after that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I remember having lessons in 4th grade with Mrs. Kaiser when I was plunking on my little half violin.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
Well done, Victoria. Hello and welcome.
My
Mhm.
name is Tyler Carter with 4 Woodland Drive. So I just have a question about going forward.
Mhm.
Because I'm gathering that there's going to be a decision made, the vote, the 20th, and you're saying that we should all get involved and come out. But you said something earlier, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it sounded like the budget is already set in stone. That proposal, that one proposal that was made, that's going through no matter what, because it has to. And is that correct?
Ish.
Kind of.
Ish.
Ish.
There's some shades of gray to that, in that the general budget, essentially the entire, I don't want to say, I mean, it's pile of money, it just seems like the wrong way to put it. The pot of money that has been allocated for the entire budget is set. It's a level funded budget. It has the increases that are available within the existing set, and it's a balanced budget. We have, the town itself says we have to have a balanced budget, so we do. That is set. That is what's going to the town meeting to be voted yes or no on. Roberta's point before, which I think you're referencing, is that once that is set, the various budgets then get their, the various committees and departments, et cetera, get their allocations from that pile of money. So school committee gets this % of the overall budget, and DPW gets this %, et cetera. That vote does not have an impact as to which area gets what, as far as, within DPW, road repairs gets 2.3%. That's actually, we're saying, here's the budget that you've allocated for, that you've made your points for. Here's the breakdown. Now it's up to the heads of those departments to then spend that money in the prepared way. But to your question, things change. If a boiler at a school were to blow up tomorrow, I keep saying it, it's gonna happen. Jeez.
I won't say it again.
If a boiler at a school was to suddenly magically regenerate tomorrow, see, there we go. There'd be a cost to that. There'd be something that had to be spent, and so there'd be some allocation within that budget because it's something that has to happen now, right? If a truck that the DPW is using, there's something wrong with that, they need to fix that, they have to spend for that now. There's some pieces of the budget that are allocated towards those types of repairs, but overall it's reactionary. So the point that we're making is that there's still some level of engagement, discussion, qualification that's going to happen once that money is allocated to the schools. They are the ones that are going to make the final decisions on what that looks like. They put together their budget today to say, this is what our plan is. And I think our point is that sometimes plans change. I can't say in any way, shape, or form that through your activism and your outreach, will you have the impact that you're looking for? I obviously can't make that promise. But at the same time, if push comes to shove, if there's an ongoing concentrated campaign and discussion about this type of issue, that's the kind of thing that's going to make people go, well, let's look at our overall options. Let's look at what we're discussing. Let's look at the things that we're cutting. Let's look at the things we're trying to move around, and let's make some really decisions about it. Because I can tell you, if you guys did not speak up, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We wouldn't be looking at it from that standpoint. We'd be like, well, this is the budget we have. There's going to be some difficulties in it. We're going to have to tighten our boots, pull the belt one loop tighter, and just move on to the next year. So you're doing the right things, but there's nothing we can change at town meeting to say that part of that budget goes to where you want it. It's continued conversation and activism and engagement to try to convince the department itself to make those moves, and the school board themselves.
So that budget, what I guess I'm trying to ask is there any possibility that increases that night? Because it just seems like
The budget overall?
Yeah, it seems like what I'm hearing is just that's it. Like for now, that's completely it.
In a sense, what we're talking about is how to spend the money that we predict will be available. Based on, we know it will be available based on what the law says we're allowed to set taxes at. So we have a set of money And what that is, what that budget represents is how that money will be allocated to the various departments in the town. The departments then spend the money themselves.
I guess to answer your question another way, the only way at this point that the school would have more money would be if we took that money from one of the other departments, and doing that would require us to basically, I mean, introduce a whole new warrant article, because essentially what will be voted on at town meeting is just, this department gets this much, this department gets this much. So at this point, for that to change, I think like very literally what would happen is that that warrant article would have to be voted down. Another warrant article proposing a different budget where the school got more money and other departments got less would have to be proposed, and then that one would have to be approved. That would obviously be difficult, especially given that the departments have all put the majority of a year into kind of figuring out their budgets. But like Mike and like Patrick were saying, the school is probably going to get, like, this is most likely all of the money that they're going to get this year just because of how late it is in the process. But obviously it's up to the leaders within the school department to determine how they choose to spend that money.
And to Davis's point, if that incredibly difficult and almost apocalyptic attempt to say, like, we're not going to fund the DPW this year, we're going to give that money to the school, there's absolutely no obligation for the school to spend that money in any way, shape, or form that you want them to. Like, if you decided to give the school more money, and we have existing, like, I know we have existing things that we're getting fined for, from a school classroom size, things like that, they can spend that whatever way they want. There was an attempt. Did someone bring it up before about the resource officer?
That's what I was going to say earlier, yeah.
There was a discussion at last town committee, or town meeting, that we didn't have in the budget the ability for a resource officer at the school, and so there was a concerted effort from parents who thought that was a very good idea to essentially to allocate that money for the resource officer. And when explained, like, you can allocate that money, you have the power to move that fund into the school committee or into the school system, but the school system does not have to spend that money on a resource officer. Like, it's just it's overall raising of the overall budget.
So the question is, when does discussion become redundant? Because it seems like every single thing that's offered is met with a stone wall, and there's just no going around it.
It's not redundant in that you're raising the awareness piece, and you're making the point that when the heads of that department make their decisions, they can't make it in a vacuum, and they can't make it without the obvious attention of the people in town that are very passionate about this issue. They're making it in that line of sight. So it's not something where they're like, well, we're cutting recess. No one's going to care. And they just move on with their day. To be fair, the school board would not be like, hey, look at all this money we have, let's do something terrible with it, right? They're looking out for the overall welfare of the entire school system. But you're bringing attention to an issue that laws are in the way of how you want to sort of allocate that money. The general amount of money that we have available and the sort of fundamental underfunding problems we have in town are in the way of that. It's not redundant, though. I said it before that I would have no idea that this was as big or as passionate an issue if you guys were not here. And so you're bringing attention to something that you cannot change in the short term, but you're advocating for the change that you want that could potentially have some level of impact. Nothing that our board can impact.
Mm-hmm.
That's the comment I made before, that it is not satisfying to hear that, and I'm aware of that, and I would like there to be something, like I say, where here's the easy button, but the opportunities to what Jamie was saying before, the positive attitude that you need to maintain, which can be difficult, is to look over time at what are the things that you can do to build what you want to see here. At town meeting, there won't be a way where suddenly a pot of money becomes available. There won't be a way at town meeting where the town, through a vote, can force Dr. Cabral to spend the money differently. That's not going to happen. We could come up with crazy, unlikely, I can promise you, bet you real money right now are not going to happen type things that could theoretically maybe work. that would not be a good use of your intellectual capabilities. The right thing that you can be doing is looking for how do we get to where we want to go? How do we keep this as a very high on the school committee's radar, so to speak? How do we keep this as something that's in front of them and that they're thinking about and they understand is as important? And for the people who are looking at sports in a similar way and the people who are looking at academics in a similar way, they should be speaking as loudly. And we should take this and put it all together and figure out how we, again, as I said before, as a community, decide where we're going to steer things for our town. It's, again, I feel like the negative guy because I want to say to you, yes, this is easy, but it's not. We're sort of very far into the process now where it becomes astonishingly difficult to even contemplate a way that could theoretically change the outcome at town meeting. I'm not being negative. I'm saying focus your effort on keeping this high on everyone's radar and focus your effort on helping the town to figure out where do we get more money.
Yeah. The good news is, the budget is a yearly thing, and we're so close to the end of this process. I think that's why it feels like everything is a stonewall, just because a lot of those decisions at this point have already been made. But once town meeting happens, you have 365 days until the next town meeting to, like Mike was saying, convince the school board how to, what kinds of things they should be prioritizing, to talk to other town leaders about how to shift the resources between the other town departments in the school. And just further to Mike's point, I was 11, I think, the last time the town did an override. And if I remember correctly, and anyone can jump in, I don't know if anyone was here when that happened, 2006? Okay, so basically what I remember from that time is that the messaging around getting an override, it really focused on the schools and about the need for more teachers and the need for better teacher pay to attract better candidates. And something like that happens because people make issues big and they make everyone really think about the consequences, and they go to meetings, they raise points, they talk to their neighbors, they talk to their friends. So I would just say, it's been tough at this time, and it feels like, I think a feeling that, you are not alone in having, is that people have felt that there's really nothing left for them to do, or that what they're saying doesn't have an impact. But these kinds of changes always rely on, people going to meetings, getting up and speaking, saying what issues they have, what they're passionate about, and it really just has to be continuous. So, obviously, like Patrick said, department heads could change their minds. We can't say for sure exactly how Dr. Cabral will spend her school budget, but the most likely reason why she would change her mind about how to spend it would be because she is, asked about it by parents and by students. And it'll be the same next year. It's just something that you just have to keep really, digging your feet in on, I think.
I also encourage everyone to take a look to understand what town meeting is about and how the votes happen and what the warrant articles look like and what they mean. That's all available online. If you give me your email address, I'm happy to email you some links directly, or anybody who's interested in them. I'm happy to share them with you. But to understand what this means and what are some of the ways that you can approach the warrant articles and your own votes. Okay. I thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
Same thing. Oh, it takes courage
Thank
to
you.
be here and to ask these questions. All right. With that, that concludes community participation. Upcoming meeting schedule, everyone. Monday, May 20th, 6 p.m. is our next tentatively scheduled Finance Committee meeting at Oliver Ames High School. It's pre-town meeting in room 109. Okay, that will be published. As always, I'll send an agenda around if we're going to have that meeting. And again, that's only going to be necessary if Connor tells me that we have bills to pay or we have some negotiations that we're ready to recommend warrant articles. With that,
One question, if those negotiations are not final, are those warrant articles just scrubbed from the overall schedule of town meeting? I don't know if there's a deadline for the negotiation or not.
it's a good question. I don't know. Those warrant articles would be removed from the warrant, but I don't know, where do they go and what happens to that? I think that allocation, it just gets pushed to
Carry on
November,
till
right, to
fall.
special
Yeah,
town
it's just-
meeting.
it could carry on till fall.
Yeah, because it's an
Something that I-
appropriation.
Yeah,
Okay,
Makes sense. Yep.
all
thank
right,
you.
guess what's left?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed?